Hey, and welcome to TSOB. This is a podcast for entrepreneurs who are interested in investing or starting their own funds. We are Adam Anderson and Zach Eikenberry. Join us to get a behind-the-scenes look at the relationships between founding entrepreneurs and the VCs that invest in them.
You missed my dance. I was literally dancing to
Did I miss it?
as in like you didn't see it, not like do you long for it again?
No. I saw it. And that's why I waited to hit record, because I needed you to finish, because it was, there it is. Never mind.
Oh man, you should see me. Middle-aged man at weddings. That is now my role.
Oh yeah. No, I get it. The fact that you're so proud about how well you can do the electric slide, where you're like, no, check it out. I have this special move in the middle of it. I get it. Mm-hmm. No, that's pretty cool.
You should see how I break it down in the cha-cha slide.
The cha-cha slide? You can do it. Do you have to stretch before that, or do you just get right out on the floor and then recover the next day?
I ignore my doctor and I don't even stretch. I just go right for it.
Man, that is it, dude. Full contact sport. Hey, speaking of full contact sport, venture capital, entrepreneurship, capital allocators. I'm Adam Anderson. That's Zach Eikenberry. You're welcome for us putting the effort out there to give you a safe place to hear about all the things. I have topics today. Do you have things you want to talk about?
No, I'm coming in ready to talk about the things you want to talk about.
Paying other people to raise money for you. I want to talk about that. That's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about our trials and tribulations. I remember the first time we wrote a $10,000 check to have somebody book meetings for us with potential VCs when we're doing the seed round. And you're like, I can't take it anymore. You have to do them. And I was like, oh, this is horrible. So I want to relive the past, explore today, and talk about your thoughts on having people get paid to raise you money. Some of that's legal, some of it's not legal. You have to be real careful how you do it. But yeah, does that sound like a fun way to spend our time?
Yes, although it's a little traumatic for me. So I'll have to navigate a set of emotions around having other people between myself and investors, and what that looks like, what that feels like.
This is how I pick our topics. I look for your pain, and then I drive a hot, like poker into it, because you're not that engaging just normally. And I feel like until we get you into some kind of pain state or traumatic, bleeding state, that don't worry, it's a safe place.
Have you been talking to my wife?
Yeah, we've been texting. She's like, that son of a mother, I'll tell him. And he just
make him feel pain so he reacts.
That's right.
I just need to know he feels something.
I need to know he's alive. He just stares at the wall thinking thoughts about his fundraising. He doesn't even remember that he has a new son. He only talks to the daughters. Yes. All right. So the concept here is, once upon a time, entrepreneurs are like, I need to raise some money, but I don't have connections. How do I leverage other people's networks to get access to people who will give me money? And I've seen a lot of different models. I've seen pay to have someone book meetings with you. I've seen pay to get on stages where people will invest. I've seen trade equity for access. I've seen all these different kind of things, but why don't we explore the different things that Hook Security has done, and even talk about how much money we spent along the way trying to get other people to do it, and then our frustrations with it. And then, by the way, this is also true for funds. I'm currently looking at people who will help me find limited partners to invest in the various funds that I am doing. And we actually have 5 million sitting ready to get deployed into our fund from a source on the East Coast, that there's a middleman involved, and we have to navigate what these middlemen are. So, Zach, can you maybe talk through some hooks?
Yeah. So if we want to talk back to the world of brokers, introduction specialists, gatekeepers, you'll have to put on the hat and remember that when we first started Hook Security, we thought we were smarter than people and we
Uh-huh.
could shortcut things, that we saw to the end and knew what needed to happen, and we we could leverage a number of non-traditional tools and approaches because other people had tried them. They just didn't, they weren't us, and they didn't try them right.
That's right.
So the two buckets that really became most pronounced in were the fundraising approach, or approach to fundraising, and then on a larger level, what SaaS was and is. And at first, we actually were highly skeptical of the mindset around groups like SaaStr,
Mhm.
and Jason Limkin's work, because we thought software and its relationship to the channel was a lot more traditional, was a lot more, hey, call, give me my orders. Anyway, so we had to get humbled pretty hard on both fronts. Um, and that doesn't mean we didn't raise money. That just means that our first tranche of funding, we we relied on, or we thought we could round it out by we worked with a group that uh, did like the pipeline development, set up meetings for us with high net worth angels who turned out to all be real estate people.
And didn't even know who we were or why we were calling.
Yes. And which was very painful. But there is an adage that I have found to be somewhat true out there, right? If you make money in real estate, you put it in tech. And if you make money in tech, you put it in real estate.
Mm.
Um,
Do
and
we? Do we though?
just as like a general trend, like you're constantly talking, especially after anybody who was able to liquidate positions coming out of 2020, 2021 in the real estate market, they were cash heavy, looking for returns that can outpace inflation. And so they're looking at tech VC, they're looking at uh, a few others, they're
Yeah.
looking at genetic research and medical research because that was on everybody's mind. Everybody became an expert at vaccines coming out of a pandemic. So the amount of people interested in that type of investment opportunity, the number of people saying, "Hey, with labor being the way that it is, it's pushing people to AI, artificial intelligence, to solve problems because getting and maintaining the right type of labor force in a way that works for you as a company owner,"
Mm.
making no comment to the remote distributed workforce things that employers can bristle at. It pushes people towards AI solutions. And
Hmm.
so you, as a real estate person, you're putting your money there because commercial large ticket is tough, and residential pipelines are, you have to deal with the public. And so those adages fell true. That's a whole sidetrack
Yeah,
about real
but the
estate.
punchline was you were calling people at a time. What was this? Is
This is
2020, 2000? It's before.
2019,
Yeah, so
early 2019.
it's people are still making good money in real estate. The world hadn't been disrupted yet, and you're calling people trying to entice them into a SaaS startup, and everyone's interested in it, but literally no one knows what they're talking about. And this particular firm that we were working with set you up with meetings with completely unqualified people to actually, like, I had to explain to one guy what cybersecurity was
Hmm.
and why it was important.
Hmm.
And I was like, oh, this is an uphill battle. This is an uphill
Yeah.
battle.
There,
So,
so there, that was one relationship that was very difficult, and we left. Just we didn't even fulfill the contract. We just said, "Peace out, y'all."
mhm,
Um, the and that's not because that firm didn't do what they said they were going to do. It's just the iterative process was going to take forever, and it wasn't actually relief to outsource that.
Do you think
Um,
that maybe we also weren't ready because it was so early on? Like now, when I hear you
yeah,
talking to VCs, it's like you're playing a violin and you're a virtuoso. You're like, my KPIs are da 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 da. And this is how you think about me, da 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 da. And they sit there in rapt attention. And when you first started, it was awful like, I eat crayons, and because of the crayon eating, you should let me lick that window. And so
very interesting pitch, right? It was my live rainbow install angle was very the yes. So the mindset wise, things did shift,
Mhm.
right? So I used to show up to a pitch to some sort of investor, trying to convince them that cybersecurity is a problem and that there is a problem and that we're going to train our way out of it. And that actually isn't the problem to solve, right? Like the high level 6 trillion in economic loss and all the other data, that's not the problem to solve. Showing up and telling people like in an equivalent fashion, like there's climate change, we're all going to die. Like, okay, what do I write a check to? Why are you talking to me
Mhm.
about this? How do I
Mhm.
can agree with you. So I would get all sorts of tacit agreement, and people would think that our company is a good company and it's a good idea at this time.
Mhm.
But until I got down to the fact that like we solve two problems really well. We solve a training effectiveness problem and we solve a training access problem. And when people understood, oh, you're targeting that, your humor based, non dilutive,
Mhm.
psychological security training approach that does not use animation is solving the problem of effective trading. Oh, and you're solving a problem by your go to market by providing access to small and mid sized businesses through the channel. You're solving those two problems. And when I was able to be crystal clear that those were the problems, and I am the best person suited in the entire world to address those two problems simultaneously.
Yep.
That's when it becomes a violin virtuoso. And I still have a lot to learn. Um, we're we're
Yeah.
kind of we're kind
I
of
mean,
at a point with our pitch decks that things are shifting here and there, and some people are picking apart parts of the narrative that they can. An investor has to feel like they know something more or add something to the conversation. I've yet to meet an investor who goes, "Sounds good, all great, no improvements to be offered. Here you go." No investor's ever said that. They've always said, "Well, you're really onto something. We're going to invest. Have you considered X?" Right? And so,
yeah. I mean, the first off, I used to believe, and I think you did too, if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. That adage. And now it's like, no, that's absolutely stupid. It's
mm,
absolutely stupid. Be the best in the room at what you do, ask for money, and let them trust you. Right. So, but the also the idea that the VC has to say something to make it seem like they're also a smart human being in the room. Um, I think sometimes it's a bit of an ego thing, and then sometimes it's a bit of I want to play ball with you. Let's go ahead. I'm going to ask questions that just to have some kind of dialogue that goes back and forth.
mhm,
Um, and I think that it's interesting to figure out what kind of VC it is. Is it the I am smart and therefore you shall listen to me because somebody
mhm.
gave me money to spend? Or, hey, I'm really interested in what you're doing, but to get a better understanding of it, I'm going to ask a couple of questions that might seem a bit weird. I
Yeah,
like that second one better.
it's usually the latter. There are some pompous egos in the VC space. There just are. Uh, but most of the time, on an emotive level, the VC is if they respect you and they like you and they're leaning in and they want to see you be successful,
Mhm.
they also want to feel part of the team. And
Mm.
so to feel
Mhm.
part of Team Hook, it's not a bad thing for them to offer up what they can. Hey, have you thought about enterprise? Or hey, I have this other person I'm going to introduce you to that also does training. Or oh my goodness, you need to get like, there's just been advice that's been tossed at me like, oh, you should, before you get a COO, how about you should really think about executive assistant. Like that was a piece of advice given.
Yeah,
Like,
whatever VC said that guy was handsome. He was smart. He was
it probably came from multiple sources. So the
came from me, asshole.
just saying, it's a group project. I don't know who did what slide.
I contribute so little that I keep track of my nuggets. All right, so that I get that one. Damn it. So let's get back to asking other people to interface with those VCs.
Yeah. So there was another issue where we brought on somebody who was like, hey, I'll take on investor relations and I'll really make your job easier when it comes to negotiating, seeing these things across the finish line. You've never raised money before. I play with big checks all the time. I'm a really smart guy. You can learn from me. And I said, fantastic. So we brought somebody onto the team, and I still haven't like gone through all my therapy sessions to diagnose exactly what was a matter, but I
Mhm.
do remember one of the biggest friction points was we were running out of capital and we had commitments of capital,
Right.
and the timelines were not matching up, and this investor relations guy had no urgency
Mm-hmm.
and was patting me on the head telling me it'll all work out. Need to just not worry about it. I mean, he even told me, "Go take out a credit card and pay your bills for a month." And
He did.
yeah, and like, don't worry
Uh,
about this. And like, I was like, it was so patronizing at the time
mm,
because I felt like the pig and chicken at breakfast. And I told him this, like, you're the chicken and I'm the pig,
yeah.
and we're not aligned.
For those of you who don't understand that metaphor, the pig dies at breakfast where the chicken just contributes eggs. All right,
Mhm.
back to your story, Zach. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So um that that was a pretty painful breakup, uh and not emotionally, it was cathartic emotionally, but just like on the business transactional level, it
Mm,
took a bit because this investor relations guy also was not versed and updated in crowdsourcing techniques for fundraising, right? And was very concerned about the SEC and other regulations that came from a bygone era and were not apropos to where we were. And also highly overestimated the amount of risk that's just present in fundraising.
yeah.
And so all of those things were difficult. And part of that risk analysis, right, is as the CEO, my job is not to mitigate risk. My job is to manage it. And the
Sexy. I need a t-shirt that says that. Yeah, we got to get a t-shirt.
right, well, so when you're working with broker investors, if you hear them say, "Listen, my job's to take the risk out of this and not make this thing go smooth and to do X, Y, and Z." To mitigate risk is to add time, which is to add risk in a different way. So risk is just moving around. It never actually goes away. You can defer risk, you can push it over to a different side, but you introduce risk into closing of a deal. I've said this before. If you're trying to put it away and you're like, it's all going to go over here now. We're going to risk the entire deal by adding a bunch of time to it so we continue to do due diligence and see what happens, right?
Mm,
And so my job is to say what is the appropriate amount of risk our organization can take and to strategically take it, and not try to live in a world without chaos, but make sure chaos is appropriately understood and managed. So, long story short, those were the reasons that that broker did not work out. But that broker also
mhm.
had, you know, financial background and like was a CFO at one point, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So,
compliance driven risk. Yeah. We love them because I'm working with a amazing compliance guy in my fund, and we're looking at terms right now on a deal that we're doing. And he's like, nope, this is what we said. These are the terms. This is what we do. To modify it means XYZ happens. And it doesn't align with what they're fantastic if they have the ability to be humble and have good conversations. So, for example, our compliance guy is like, I don't know how to price things. I don't know how to run the company. My job isn't to make the final decision on any of this. My job is to advise, tell you what the risk is, but I don't make a decision about how that risk affects our company. You make the decision about how, because he didn't want it. And it's smart, right? If you're the compliance person, your job isn't to guarantee compliance. Your job is to educate the business so the business makes a business decision around how they perceive the risk. And so when you have somebody that you're working with that doesn't quite understand that they're like, no, this is the Holy Grail. This is the only thing that matters. It goes back to a couple episodes ago when you were singing lovely songs about lawyers and how all they do is kill the deals and that they don't understand the value chain. If you get involved with that when in the middle of your fundraising and you now have the absolutely zero risk in the fundraising, chances are you're not raising money.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because lawyers and compliance officers, etc., they live in a world where they see the results of unmitigated risk or unmanaged risk, right? And it can be so painful to go to court or to see clients suffer or to see entire companies fall down because of some sort of missed thing in the compliance and an avoidable issue. They turn around and they do everything they can to not repeat that, right? So like a good experienced attorney is doing everything they can to keep you out of the courtroom. And yeah, that's perfectly fair, but unfortunately in the world we live in, you have to find a way to walk a line.
Yeah.
You just do. And so what you would need to do is if you're engaged with somebody who wants to do investor relations, helping you close deals as a legal perspective, to bring that in. But part of the issue with this particular person is all at the end of the day, he did not want to answer to me or let me make that final call.
Correct.
He would veto my call.
Yep.
And say I made the wrong one, pushing to close on capital that was, I was like, hey, we just at the time is like, we need to bring in the 600K committed. And he was like, no, they asked for us to get to 1 million before we do the capital call. And I was like, they don't care.
Yeah.
But he asked me, and they were going to lose the whole deal. And I'm like, no, we're not. Just so we got rid of them, and then I made the phone call and got the money, right? And so,
yeah, lessons learned on this is that it should have performance-based equity after da 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 da. Like what you did was you had a vesting period and you also had equity assigned, and so we de-risked, or we made it so that we weren't giving everything away. But retrospect, and this is one of the great things about what we do, is every time we do learn how to make it a little safer and a little bit better. So in the future, hey, do this. But if you're going to bring somebody in to do equity, make it performance based. Not I did the paperwork and that we paid the lawyer to do. And now what we want is money in the bank. You get rewarded by money in the bank, but that also gets you into like SEC stuff. Like, do you have the right to do that? The broker, you have to be very careful when you're engaging with somebody else to open doors and get money from them. So what was next after that?
yeah. So this is the one that makes us look the worst.
And it also was brand new. Like I think the company just decided to raise money, and it was just brand new. I mean, you were in the offices of the company that we were sharing, that we started right before this company. And I mean, I still remember that. That was
I'm not a fan of spending money on rent, by the way. And we're gearing up to a season where we have like an office space that's worth renting, but long story short is I don't like rents. Don't like them. Don't like them for startups. I like co-working. That's a great solution for a lot of folks, like temporary office spaces. But uh, in the sojourn of Hook Security, we went from your basement to a co-working space to sharing an office with a company to sharing an office with another company. And
Yep.
so that's just part of how I roll. Well, in that journey, so you're right. There's a context of, we're still bouncing around. There's only 3 or 4 of us, and maybe 5 or 6 at this point. I was put on to an angel network. I'm going to use quotes, an angel network, uh, out of Atlanta. And what was weird is I asked our attorneys who were out of Atlanta, have you heard of this group? And they said, no, keep your guard up. And then I called and talked to them, and they said, hey, it's a bunch of private, high net worth individuals who don't want to be named. And so that's why we keep it on the DL, the down low for all this. But here's a couple of free sessions where we'll go over your pitch deck. We'll kind of, and here's all the due diligence. You need to put everything in this Dropbox folder, et cetera, et cetera. And at the time, I was like, hey, we're going to be running out of capital in the next, 4 or 5 months because we have hired people.
I forgot these people. Then they charge like 5K up front or something like that.
Yeah, no, my recollection was it might have been 5K, but my recollection was 2,500. And I like called you, and it was like a minimum 3 months. It's like 2,500 a month for 3 months, and I was like, this is going to put us close if we do this. And we
I
kind of
love
went back.
how many times Hook has almost gone bankrupt. It's like, is it Tuesday again? And the fact that we're like almost to that point, or you actually are, you are past that point where we are default alive, but still, it's that trauma for 3 years of like, we stay in business. This is neat. Are we going to cover payroll next week? I don't know, man. Maybe something's going to happen, and then it happens.
Have I told before we go back to that story? Have I told you my payroll story?
Well,
So I was talking
maybe.
with a mentor of mine who spent 30 years at IBM and then built his own company. And one night I was hanging out with him in downtown Greenville, and as we were imbibing, and I had all sorts of courage. This guy's like 60, not 60, he was like 75 years old at the time. And I look at him, his name's Ed. Go, Ed, you're an entrepreneur if you can't sleep at all on Thursdays because you got payroll coming out on Friday. And he looks at me like, no, this is a true story. This is not apocryphal. And he goes, Zach, you sleep like a baby Thursday night. You can't sleep at all on Sunday because they're about ready to cash those checks.
Yeah, he ain't wrong.
That's right.
He ain't wrong. You're gonna have some conversations on Monday.
So back to these cats. We were always a little trepid, but we're like, this is the play. They have these high net worth people. They drop some names. They, we're in due diligence. I spent hours and hours putting together all the documentation they required. I went down this checklist, put it into Dropbox. Can't find their physical address, but but I'm talking to this guy, and he brings on this other dude who has like a very pronounced like LinkedIn profile with all this investment banker stuff. But even then, like you can fake a lot of job history into LinkedIn if you want to.
Just look at my profile. 50% of that is all lies. You guess which one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, which 50%.
Yeah.
So I'm making the story longer than it should be, but so nothing happens the first 30 days. And he's like, oh, somebody had to reschedule. We had to reschedule. We got to do this. Now you need to wire another 2,500 to keep this thing going because you guys agreed. And I was like, hey, I pulled an all-nighter to get this stuff to you in 5 days in our first 30. So you've dragged your feet for 25 days. So I call up our attorney again. And he's looking at it, and we can't find anybody that is in this network. And I said, hey, you before I send this wire, I need to know the evidence and the names and the email addresses of the people who we're talking to that are going to show up at this meeting. This big fabled meeting of high net worth individuals from Buckhead and Blue Ridge, Georgia. And he's like, no, that's not how it works. Send me the money and then I'll send you the names. And we were in a standoff for like a week. And then I talked to the attorney and he's like, well, here's an email of somebody we know at the SEC. Why don't you CC them on it and CC me and send them a note saying, like, hey, we're very concerned about the legitimacy of your organization. We'd like some evidence that, and then he disappeared.
Ooh, how about that?
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So is there a single good experience? Well, before we jump into there, continue down the thing. So from I don't recall any other times where we were like, hey, I'm gonna pay you to actually go and do a thing. Is it now you just went and I got this and you go back and you close the first 600K and then you just started brute force doing it all yourself? Or were there any other times you gave money or equity or some kind of incentive to somebody else to go and help us raise money?
Only internal. So we gave a former employee a little bit of equity to introduce us to somebody who's on our board now, Jim Ackerhelm at the time. If you remember that. And then uh, Brad Powell, one of our other original OGs at Hook Security, he introduced a family member to us.
And he got some.
He got a little kicker for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But those internal introductions, we've had a couple of introductions from board members and current investors. And then the rest of it, I am not aware of another dollar coming in without me talking to my personal network,
Mm-hmm.
referrals, online applications, brute force, LinkedIn, phone calls.
Yeah, 100K a shot, right? You're just going out to networking events, you're being in the right place at the right time, you're doing the hustle of showing up to give yourself a chance.
hmm And just leaning in and when people ask, like, hey, are you taking investment? And let's talk. Like, and so um that's how we got the rest of it. Well, except for there was a time where we followed up with a current investor,
Mm-hmm.
um, couple, I guess, current couple times, but we went back to an institution, SCRA, SC Launch, and we said,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we could use additional capital to weather a storm we're facing, and they pulled together for that. Um, but those are so today we have another email in our inbox talking with an investment banking firm that is reputable. They're new to the scene. They're a couple years old, so they don't have a long track record. They are new to the scene, and they are asking for an engagement
Mm-hmm.
in which we pay out a fixed fee, and they get at this point in time, it is a little below market as far as I understand. But they would get a 5% success fee if we raise this round. Um, and their goal is to get us a lead investor in 60 days. And that's it.
So here's how I'm thinking about that. You stated it's frustrating to have someone between you and the different investors because people invest based off of relationships and based So part of me is like, man, I really want to continue to increase my network through the fundraising. Do you believe with the proposal on the table that we can also treat that fee, that upfront fee, as potential, networking, marketing? That's kind of how I'm putting it in my head. Is
Yeah, we can call it whatever you want, right? But
oh
like,
well,
yeah,
then I would like to call it the Pretty Pretty Princess.
yeah,
And
no, no. I mean, that's It's um it's a fixed fee because as far as I understand, they are relying on a few outside contractors and people they've engaged with
Yeah.
to follow through on their side. So, it's a core investment banking group, but I'm not sure there's more than 5 people full time at the company. And then their VCs and other folks that are in the circle, those guys all require money for their time. And so,
We haven't interviewed anyone on this podcast. I kind of want to do like a one-off where we bring our trusted resource from there on and just like, hey, as a follow-up to one of our episodes, we'd like you to explain to me how all this works. Like pitch us that we should work with you. I don't know. Maybe that's a dumb idea.
Hmm?
I got curious and then I started talking and then I was like, man, I don't care.
yeah, it's
There's so many other cool things to talk about. That's probably
so.
not where I want to start.
I mean, we could. It would be a worthwhile conversation. And it's probably worth pointing out that they are third on a list of 3 strategies that are running parallel, right?
Correct.
So there's a first strategy where a current investor has relationships with current venture capital that they just had excellent returns with, and they're moving us in that direction. So setting up appointments there. There's a second, which is a finder fee based organization. So only on success, who has followed us in the news and has lined up a number of conversations with about 30 or some VCs, 30 or so VCs, with
Mhm.
people they know. The issue with them is they have about half of those VCs have a lot of European money in them. So it's like European money looking for US market opportunity.
Uh-huh.
And this particular company has an office in Barcelona and an office in San Francisco. So they're back and forth. But
Hey,
and that's the second strategy that's running in parallel. And the third strategy would be this investment banking group. This is the only one requiring capital. And so what I told this investment bank and what I'll tell anybody is, I'm trying to bring, a nuclear bomb to a knife fight when it comes to our Series A. And so that's what I'll be doing the rest of the day today is after this podcast, I have 4 or 5 hours blocked off just going through pipeline, setting up the VC introductions, running it out. Um, so going into September, we're at the end of August now. We're going to hit the gas.
so I can't help but get a little greedy, or maybe I want to sound smart. The taking money from EU, why is that sticky?
I don't know that it's sticky with US regulators. I think it's sticky on their side. Um, and part of it is, as I understand it, I could be completely off. Um, the EU regulators want a level of transparency that infringes on a lot of privacy concerns that US investors express, right? The US investor doesn't want government entities all up in their business if they're just experimenting, trying to allocate capital in legal, healthy ways. Where, right, it's one thing, it's like, it's the difference between the EU coming along and saying, prove to us you haven't committed a crime. And in the US, you have to prove that you did commit a crime, right? There's two mindsets
Yeah.
to regulation. And
Well, with
that's my
the
understanding is that's what's happening with some of these hybrid funds is they have a level of transparency that they have to give to the EU and others.
the reason, so I once tried to raise money from Richard Branson and Peter Norris and all these guys, and the reason they don't want to invest a lot of money into US based companies, especially US based companies that are doing business with the government, is the amount of information that the IRS demands from them. And then,
Yeah, the IRS and its treaties, but the
yep.
IRS leverages
So
the
we
EU
put
treaty.
the our BBI fund washes all that away because we have a stopgap where so yeah,
That's right.
I think if any of these EU guys are interesting to you, I would say funnel them through Anzus's BVI fund, and you can still get the money. But they just so this is the weird thing about the fund side of the house. And when you talk about moving money from all over the world, there's so many different rules in so many different countries that often I want to give you $1. And because of all the hoops I have to get through, you only get like 60 cents of that dollar because of all the middleman and overhead and all that other stuff. And so, when you're talking to somebody and they're like, I'm going to raise you money, where that money comes from matters, not just because of all the reasons that you might think, but also because there's so many middlemen that require to stand there to make sure that the money is compliant, that you're So, I mean, that's one of the big driving forces that we had with our cybersecurity fund, is that so many people in the world want to invest in this and they want access to all these different deals, is that you have to put elegant structures together that allow people to, move the money the way that they need to. And how do I be compliant everywhere? And that's that's a heavy lift.
Yeah, this is funny. I think one of the things that's going to be interesting is this podcast and this project will date us, right? Like in 20 years,
Mm.
If the DeFi infrastructure catches strength, right? Right now it is patronizing to the 95% of the world population, maybe 99% of the world population, who is restricted from investing in startups and private equity companies, etc., because it's too risky and the government knows better than you about where to put your money. And then when you do put your money in, the amount of compliance and regulatory burden and the amount of friction that is caused through just the loss of capital through the regulation slows down innovation, slows down our ability to solve big problems, etc. And it doesn't seem just sustainable as long as if we can build a technology internet infrastructure in such a way that it is not burdened by or relies on the government to function. If the infrastructure is independent, then what rides on that infrastructure, DeFi, can become independent. And it's not about avoidance as much as it is about effectiveness and efficiency.
Let's preach it. Those are all the right words. I mean, I love my friends over at NASA, but for my moonshine distillery to take a short little, stop off at the International Space Station on its way to the orbital manufacturing plant, the distilleries up there, 80% of the cost was government compliance in order to even have a shot at taking a look at using the ISS. And I get it. There's like one of them, and it's the most expensive thing ever created in human history. I totally get it. But the velocity of innovation in space is really tamped down because there's a certain amount of people who are investing, and that's great. Like, go get them, Elon. Go do the things. Go get them, Jeff. Go get them, Richard. So, but there's so many more people who would deploy capital into it if they were able to deploy capital into it. And that's what I love about the DeFi side of the house. And I don't know if it's witchcraft or not, but I do know. So that is what we're actually going to be using. I'm negotiating right now with how do we fund this moonshine distillery in space using DeFi. And we're going to have real data about how that went. How was I able to raise the $250 million to $1 billion selling NFTs to fund a moonshine project? And we'll know by November, December 2022. So stay tuned to that episode, because everything we just talked about might be stupid in a couple months.
I do think there's a whisper of a story that it was one day going to be made a movie about. There's one engineer, this is what I've been told, at the James Webb Project that basically saved and turned around the James Webb Telescope, but they did it in spite of the regulations. And it's like it's going to be written as like a spy drama about these couple of engineers, but there's one guy in particular who navigated the system by being two-faced through the whole project to get that thing actually up. And because
Yeah,
if politicians, attorneys, and accountants get to drive, there will never be there will never be a telescope in space.
correct.
And so I'm told that 5 years from now there'll be a Netflix movie on just all the drama behind the scenes to get the James Webb
I
Telescope up.
want to watch that immediately. And also I want to watch my mockumentary on Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby trying to race a car on the moon, because that's part of my marketing strategy, Zach. We're coming to the end of our time together. Let's do a little hot take here. Brand new babypreneur walks up to you to say, "Hey, Zach." This is how he talks. "Zach,
Hmm.
I really want to. I've got this great idea and I've got customers, but I need capital. There's this nice man who said he'll put me in contact with a whole bunch of VCs. Should I pay him?" What are some of the questions that you would ask this gentleman, and what would the advice be that you would give them?
Some of the questions, right, would be like, I would go down the whole path of what makes you think you need this capital this time this way with
Mm-hmm.
this amount of, what does this person really want? Why aren't they on your team and aligned to the success of the outcome? Why do you get to take all the risk and offload the risk to them by paying them? All that, right? That's what I would be asking at that point in time. And you know, there would be um, a number of red flags going off, especially if it sounds like that person is selling their services
Mm-hmm.
and not just offering them up as like, hey, why don't we go to lunch together? I'll bring 5 people to the room and we'll figure it out. And if they decide to invest, what have you, my honorarium for the time together is,
ABC.
$100,000, whatever
Yeah.
it is, like, and I've seen people and people have done that kind of thing, right? And it's usually like, you know, retired folks who still maintain a country club membership, and they're like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
buy us lunch, figure it
Come to
out
the
on the
club.
back end, come
Yeah.
out. Yeah. Um, those things seem to be, I'm going to say, acceptable, but I would like, if you can do all the other hard things of selling your first product, launching a team, like all this, like I'm afraid that being an entrepreneur, there are no shortcuts, and you just got to get good at pitching and raising money.
Oh, dude, but that's the wrong answer. We keep wanting the short. I can do it in 5 months when if you did it in 12 months. No, you're 100% right. At the end of it, it's just you're gonna suck at pitching at the beginning, get to pitching. You're going to the thing to remember is to avoid the scarcity mindset. There is so much money out there.
Hmm.
You think that you only have like 4 people to talk to, but every single time you talk to a VC, ask for who else do you know in your network who I should be talking to.
Especially if you're a no. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a no, that's fantastic. Who else should I be talking to? Who else should I be talking to? Who else should I be talking to? Because no VC wants to, it's actually interesting. They are humans. They get the fact that you are doing something hard. And, if you say, who should I talk to and where should I be before I talk to them? They will
Mhm.
literally just tell you.
Yeah. Most of them aren't trying to hide the ball. That's
Nope.
right. Yeah.
Well, this has been delightful.
Wait, what would you say? Is that what you would tell them? No shortcuts?
Yeah, I'll tell no shortcuts. I would say that you better look, if you're new to the thing, and I know this is going to be, most people are going to shrug and just walk away with their middle finger in the air after I say this. Start with an incredibly high net worth human being as part of the team at the beginning, right? That's the way to be. Somebody who can write a big check to get you started so that you can build the traction. meaning have the customers to go to angel networks and VCs. Because these days, a good idea gets you nothing. Paying customers gets you something. And so figure out, what do you need to get the minimum amount of customers to demonstrate that people are experiencing pain, that are willing to pay money to you at a level that makes it so that you can grow. And once you have that, you can go talk to VCs, but not before. And if anyone comes to you and says they can get people to talk to you and you've only got like $50,000 in the bank and they're going to charge you $10K, you can't afford that. Just walk away. Use that $50K to do something else. But no, it's network, get access, do your stuff. I know that doesn't, I mean, me saying use the Good Old Boy Network is really tough if you're not part of the Good Old Boy Network. So your co-founders matter. If you don't have access, find somebody who does have a little bit better access than you and bring them into the house. So,
yeah, there you go.
Man, I hate that advice.
I know, right? Because
I hate that advice.
It's not about what you do; it's about who you know.
100%.
And then you can easily trip over into the paying for access.
Yeah,
because you're willing to pay the $100 for the golf cart rental to go out on the course.
Yeah.
And that's paying for access, but are you willing to pay $2,500 to get on a Zoom call with somebody? And like, there's somehow it trips over.
Are you willing to pay
another level
$50,000 to go to Richard Branson's island just so that you can meet 30 other people who also spent $50,000 to go to Richard Branson's island, and they're not actually all investors, and no one's allowed to sell to each other and all that? I mean, how you spend your money and how you spend your time and who you talk to actually matters. And so, yeah, man, it's so tough when you're getting started and you know none of the things. Such a heavy lift.
That's right.
That's kind of one of the reasons I like being on the capital side of the house these days. Although I am building other businesses, but whatever. This is addictive. Maybe I have a problem.
Parallel entrepreneur.
Parallelpreneurship, my friend. It's the way to be. All right. Well, shall we let this one go? Well done. I know I believe this is going to be super important to people, because every single one of us has gotten to the state of when we're trying to raise money that we're like, can't I just pay someone to do this? By the way, that's also the same thing with sales and marketing. You're going to try to pay somebody, but you know what? Do it anyway. Everyone needs to hire that high-powered salesperson who has all the connections. Did you see his Rolodex? Whoa, what do you mean? Where's your leads? Go sell, buddy. We're a startup. All right, Zach, take care. Hey, and thanks for joining us for the TSOB podcast. Find us on LinkedIn and give us your hot take. The whole reason we're doing this is to get access to better conversations that help us up our game. And if you have something you want to share, we want to hear about it. Find us on the TSOB LinkedIn group and jump in with 2 feet. We can't wait to chat.